Faith can feel like hearts and butterflies until someone lights a match and burns it all to the ground. Welcome to the Burning Butterflies podcast.
The sad thing is that there's abuse of every kind within the church. But the spiritual abuse is the stuff that just
It's a place there shouldn't be abuse. Like, there just shouldn't be abuse in a place that claims Jesus.
Well, it ruins your soul. If you're new here, we suggest listening to our prologue episode first. This is the story of two women's journey through spiritual abuse and escaping from toxic church culture while finding hope in Christ.
Sometimes it's just the facts, and if you get offended by it, that's a you issue. And if we can't be mature enough to have these conversations, even if some of the topics are difficult, then shame on us.
In today's episode, we're going to jump right back in where we left off last week with my love bombing, and we're going to talk about my indoctrination. When we last left you last week, I had just completed all of the next step classes, had a one-on-one interview with Pastor Tom, and he told me that I would not only be a wonderful fit to take over the website for the church, but also to become a youth leader. So let's get into it. And so I was eager to do the website, but I was reluctant to become the youth leader, or to be a youth leader. And he was like, well, I want the youth leader, the guy who's running it and his wife, I want them to come over to your house and talk to you. So they came to my house, and at this point, my husband and we had lived with his parents. It wasn't even a full year. Like, we moved in like May, and we had bought our house and moved into our house on Valentine's Day, the following year. So in 2006, Valentine's Day of 2006 is when we moved into our own house. So we didn't have to live with my in-laws for very long. And so they come over to my house, they sit down with me, and they have this conversation, and they're, just a few years older than me. Their kid is just like 1 year older than Ryder is, and his wife is like, well, like a bunch of us moms like get together and we like just meet, during the week, like on a morning, and we call it morning munchies, and we meet and we hang out, and the kids have like a play date. And she's like, well, I think, if you're going to be serving and stuff, you should get to know other women in the church, and so this is a really good opportunity for you. So she invited me to morning munchies. I ended up saying, yeah, I'll be a youth leader. At that point, they had they were a husband and a wife team leading the youth, but she never came to youth group.
Right.
Like, he would come to youth group, but she would stay home with their kid.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So, did you ever think, I guess I shouldn't assume, so did you ever have a thought of like what you might want to do, or what your church experience might look like for yourself?
No,
before
never.
Anybody told you what you should or shouldn't? It's all I've heard in
No.
your story is
Yeah.
like, well, you should do this and you should do this, and
Yeah.
well, you're this, like you took this assessment and this is who you are, so this
Yeah.
is what you should do, and none of like,
No, and I think it's that
like,
desperation. I was so desperate to be the good person.
Yeah.
I knew, like, at this point, I'm saved. I have been baptized. I'm I am just completely embarrassed about, like, the fact that my husband and I had been sleeping together before we were married. Like, I didn't want anyone to know. Like, I was, like...
Like you're coming into this new environment and now you're trying to conform.
Yes.
And
And
trying
so
to
I was so desperate to be the good Christian
Yeah.
person. I wanted that so deeply for myself.
Yeah.
I
But did you have any ideas like outside of the things that you were being
I had no idea how to do anything.
told?
Like I had no idea how church worked.
Yeah.
Like I had no
Like
frame of
absolutely
reference.
none. Like your
Yeah,
church
no.
experience was like I mean, I just wonder if like you were sitting there like I'm going to take this spiritual gift test and wonder if I'm the kid who's going to light the candles on Sunday. I'm just trying to think of like this Lutheran experience that I had.
No, like so.
And thinking like the only thing I could think of was being like the lady in the office. It just like
yeah. And so like it never like it was all very much like so one of the big things that came out at this point in time was Rick Warren's 40 Days of Purpose.
Okay.
And then a purpose-driven church
Right.
followed. And the whole church went through this.
Yeah.
Purpose-driven church, 40 Days of Purpose.
Yeah.
They all went through it to the point of like everyone was in these studies.
Yeah.
They were doing the studies, and then you would come to church on Sunday, and whatever that week's class was about, that's what the sermon was about.
Right. It was like a church-wide study. We're going to do this
Yes.
church-wide study, but it's not.
Which would later be known as the fall campaign, which we'll get there.
Yeah.
But
this is like the beginning.
This is my first introduction to it.
Here's this great book I read. We're going to do this as a church.
Yes. And so it was all about finding your purpose, living your purpose. What does God want you to do with your life? God has given you a purpose. He has a plan and a purpose for your life. He is here to prosper you, not to harm you. So how are you going to use your gifts, your talents, your spiritual gifting in order to further the kingdom? Because that's what God wants from you.
And so you were confident up until this point that you were going to go. You fell in love with sign language. You're going to be a sign language interpreter. That's like you have your life pictured in some way, shape, or form.
Oh yeah, and all that.
You're going to do. And
I threw all that out the window.
And then what did you
so
think
fast
before? That's what I'm like. But before they started inputting what you needed to be, did you have a thought of like,
no,
what am I going to do?
It was literally the same day. I left feeling defeated.
Maybe you have to
came.
Stay.
And
that must be a sign from God.
Literally the same day, I was like, okay, I need to be all in. And I watched my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law was all in. She was working a 40, 50-hour-a-week job. Like, she had her own job, and then she would go and volunteer her time. She was the church financial person.
Yeah.
She was the bookkeeper, accountant, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
She did all of that voluntarily. And so I watched her. And my father-in-law served. Like, he was on the worship team at one point, which is, like, kind of like... I know. And so...
Well, next time I see him!
So...
No, but, like, so now you hit this transition.
Yeah.
Like, I know what I'm doing. I'm moving back to Laramie. I'm going to be a sign language interpreter. That just fell through, and before I can even take a breath or have a thought, I am now being given what I'm going to think and what is going to shape me for the next
20 years of my life.
20 years of my life. And every thought that you have is like this conditioned, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to apologize to you for that, because somebody should. Number one, somebody should apologize to you.
And it's the system. It wasn't these people.
No,
It's the system that was set up. And so you have all of these things. I'm serving.
You were church. Like, you are the definition
of
somebody who was churched by a church.
I was the freaking poster child.
Yeah.
And so
that is like
Wow. I'm starting to make friends who are my own age. I'm starting to go to these, this morning munchies group and everything. And then we start taking marriage classes.
Okay.
And so we go through to becoming one. We go through love and respect. we're doing these marriage classes because we want to have a godly marriage.
Yeah.
Which we are going to do an episode on that coming up.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to go like too deep into those right this second, but that shaped who I was.
Yeah.
Those classes were life changing for me.
Wow. Like you are the epitome of everything that, like, okay, coming out of all this, from this is like 2020 vision.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because I keep asking you questions. I want to understand where you were as a person, like in that time, without the jade. It's not even jadedness,
no, like,
but without the knowledge.
This was
and
so
the
euphoric. This was
have.
so euphoric for me because I thought I was living my best life.
Yeah, but so much of this podcast is going to make so much sense as we go on.
Yeah.
When people understand that you were groomed to be the poster child. Because if you haven't figured out, like, listening up until this point, like, you were 15 when you walked in the doors of Come As You Are. I was 34 going on 35, in that age range right there. I had a lot of life, a lot of churches that I've attended, a lot of different religion experiences and things. And I had like 2 lifetimes of experience walking into the door, and you were the poster child of what we were supposed to become, in a sense.
So
wow.
Then I take Master Life.
Yeah.
So Master Life is the study that Tom found somewhere along the way. And it is 4 books.
Mm-hmm.
Each book lasts 6 weeks. So you're talking like if you're going to do all the books, you're talking this is a 6-month commitment of your life. There's intense homework. We're talking an hour's worth of homework a day, every single day. Plus you have the class where you meet and you discuss and you're doing all these things, and it's supposed to teach you how to master your life.
Right.
It teaches you things like how to have a quiet time, how to properly pray, how to read God's word, all of these things.
Which in and of itself,
nothing wrong with that. But this is the class.
But this is the flagship.
And if I want to,
this is next to the Bible.
And at this point in Come As You Are, if you want to serve, you have to have gone through all of the step classes and take Master Life. So if you're wanting to serve, you're talking a year commitment of classes before you're allowed to do anything.
Which, all of this happening within the, like, other than the fact that you had visited throughout high school and college time, like you had visited because you're the kid of somebody who goes there.
Yeah.
All of within moments of walking through the door as an adult, could be a member of this church, you are indoctrinated into this is how we do. Like this is
my entire 2007 is spent taking classes. We're teaching you don't want to be a baby Christian. Right. You don't want to drink milk. You want to eat meat. You want to run. You want to serve. You want to be all in. We want to help you get there. Here's how you do it. Right. So you either take the classes that were written by Tom, or you take the one
approved class
to learn how to be a disciple.
Right.
They are disciple making classes.
Which both of those things are cult characteristics or high control religion organization characteristics. Just
and so point that out. I go straight from Master Life, which you were already is taught by Tom.
So we're like, we're going to serve, but you can serve ahead of time because we've qualified you with this quiz.
Yes.
So we want you to serve, but you have to take these classes so you can catch up on the checkbox.
Yes, because I had to take Master Life because I was one of the youth leaders. Yeah. I now I see they had no female youth leader.
Yeah.
And my first night as a youth leader, I walk in, I'm nervous as heck. No one told me what to expect. They just said, "Oh yeah, we'd love to have you as a youth leader. Show up at the office 6:30 on a Wednesday." I'm nervous. I have no idea what we're doing. I've never been to a youth group in my life. Like my mom, like when my parents were going through divorce, my mom tried to take us to youth group. I would walk in the front doors of the Lutheran church, watch my mom drive away. I would walk out the back doors across the alley to the park, and I would sit there and drink with my friends. I'm like, well, crap, mom's going to be here soon. I would swish some mouthwash, put some gum in my mouth, walk in the back door of the church, and walk out the front and wait for my mom on the front steps.
Yeah.
Like, that's what my mom thought I was doing. And she thought, she was like, you know, my kids are going to be messed up because I'm going through a divorce. I'm going to take her to youth group. I didn't want to go to youth group at the Lutheran church. And so, like, I have no experience with church youth group whatsoever, which, by the way, like, I think kind of made me a good youth leader, because when the kids would come in and try to, I'd be like, dude, I invented that. Like,
right. I'm the real OG. You don't even know.
Yeah. Nice try, sir. And so I had no idea what to expect.
Right.
I was nervous. I come in and the kids are pissed.
Yeah.
And at first I think they're pissed at me. And so then the youth leader like kind of starts his thing. The kids are like, "We heard you and Tom were mad at each other and that you said you were leaving the church." And this guy's like, no. I love you guys. I'm here to stay. Whatever. This is Wednesday.
Yeah.
The guy's like, "No, I'm not leaving. I love you guys. We, adults have disagreements. I'm a part of this family," right? Thursday, I go in to work on the website. And the church office at that time was
in another building, right?
Yeah, like, because we didn't have our own building.
Right.
We were meeting at the high school. So we had like this little office space. And so like you'd walk in the door and there was like just one big room, and it was just like a bunch of couches in a circle, like where you met for Bible study and stuff. Then there was like the secretary, and you had to walk into her little office space and through a door, and there was a office, and there was like 2 computers in there, and that's where like anyone, like the youth leaders, the worship leaders, me doing the church website, anyone could come in and use those 2 computers to do church work. Then there was a window, like on the back wall of that office, there was a window and a door. And if you walk through that door, that was Tom's office. And then this window that he would have slide open so he could talk to whoever was doing stuff. But then if someone came in to meet with him, he would close it. Well, it's
a window.
It's a window.
You can little
there's no
window,
curtains,
right?
and
Yeah.
like, I mean, you can hear everything through it.
These are like fabricated
So
walls.
the youth leader comes in, walks into Tom's office, shuts the door. Tom shuts the window. They have at it with each other,
Screaming and yelling.
screaming to the point where I feel so uncomfortable. I'm like, I'm just gonna leave, and I will just finish doing what I'm doing later.
Yeah.
Like, I just left.
Right.
That guy never returned to church ever again. Never saw him. And so then I show up the next Wednesday. He's a no-show, and it's me and the other youth leader guy. Like, so we were 2 helpers, and the guy just no call, no show, nothing. And we have to basically like pull a youth lesson out of our butts and figure out what we're doing and how to be youth leaders.
Sit with that moment for just a second. You find yourself leading a youth group that you've never even attended. Okay. All to end up on the other side of a wall with a pastor who is angry and screaming at a youth leader who is angry and screaming.
Yeah.
What?
And it made me so uncomfortable. And I went home and I was like, that was really like, I don't know, there was something wrong with that. And so then I didn't know what to do with it.
Right.
Like, I didn't know who to say something to. I didn't know who to ask questions to. And so I didn't say anything about it. And then the next week I went to Morning Munchies. And because that youth leader's wife is the one who invited me to Morning Munchies. She's not there. Right. So I asked the other lady, I'm like, what happened? They're like, oh yeah, they left the church. But there was a woman there who was on like cleanup duty. Like she was there to fix the narrative. Right. And she's like, well, there was an issue and him and Tom had an argument and yes, things got heated and they all agreed that he shouldn't have yelled at Tom and Tom shouldn't have yelled at him and everything that happened was completely ungodly and nothing should have happened that way. So everyone felt like it was best that they just parted ways. And they're fine now. They're all on good terms. There's been reconciliation, but they both agreed that their personalities, that when they got upset, that their personalities, they shouldn't be upset in the same place. Okay. And that is the reason why that happened.
So you just happened to go to the mom's group the next day.
Yeah, it was
within the week, right?
Yeah, like a week later,
within a week, right? Within a week, because those things happen weekly. And this lady is able to explain it all away and make it all okay.
Yeah. And at that point, the only experience I've had...
And their personalities. Like, I just want to be very clear. Because of their faulty personalities. Even though we wouldn't say it.
Oh yeah. Like two dudes screaming at each other. Yeah. And then it's like, well, they're both really passionate, so...
And then we know somebody was there, so then we had to... Because, like... Why else?
If I hadn't have been there,
nobody would have shared and they witnessed yelled at each other. No, that's the part that
I would have showed up to youth the next week and been like, "What the heck happened?"
And nobody knew. But the fact that it was even brought up in the narrative that they had yelled at each other when nobody would have known if you hadn't been there.
Yeah. And from stage, Tom would say, like, I'm a passionate Italian. I'm loud and, I have this passion, but God has given me this because, he knew I was a pastor.
Somebody use it for good.
Yeah. And so I've experienced Tom being what I felt was very gentle in, like, those meetings with me. Like, he still is continually to tell me, like, I remind him of his daughter and all of this stuff. So I developed this, like, I didn't have a dad that would tell me he was proud of me. I didn't have a dad who would tell me, like, oh my gosh, you did such a great job.
So Dad is doing that
And
now.
Tom was fulfilling that to me. I take this Master Life class. Yeah. And again, taught by Tom. Yeah. And through this class, I witnessed Tom being passionate for the Lord. Right. Like, someone had said something about, like, praying a hedge of protection around someone. And Tom didn't like that because he said that, like,
he didn't agree with that,
we don't pray hedges of protection around someone. Okay. And, like, I forget what his reasoning was behind it, but, like, he didn't agree with that theology. And so he got all worked up, and he did, and he's like, you will never, ever pray that here again.
Okay, let's talk about that. Because this is like...
But then, and I mean, we're in a class, there's like, I don't know, probably like 8-9 people in this class, and this guy prays this, and after the prayer, Tom yells at him.
Like, I want you to clarify.
Not...
Yells. Like, he raised his voice.
Like...
He spoke passionately... with loudness, or
when Tom gets upset, his face changes. Yeah. There is like a vein in the middle of his forehead that comes out. I just want our
listener to understand.
Yes, no, like he turns red. His whole body tenses up, and he looks at you with such an intense, like, intimidation stare down, and his voice gets, like, he doesn't have, like, a very deep voice for a man, but his voice lowers, like, a full octave. Yeah. And he goes, "You will never pray that in here again."
Wow.
And like we all just are like, "Oh."
Wow.
And then he goes into this impassioned sermon
Right.
about how we don't tell God what to do. And as he's preaching, his tone softens. He returns back to his normal, like, you know, level, and his body softens, and he even says, like, I got worked up over this because we cannot do this as Christians. We cannot tell God what we need from him.
Yeah.
And like that was the norm.
Yeah.
And so I never felt like, oh, I don't want to say something because I don't want to make him mad.
Right.
Like, I never felt that.
Right.
I was, at that point in time, I wanted so badly to be the best Christian that I could be that I didn't want to have that. I didn't want to let him down.
Right.
That I had sinned and I had fallen short and I was not understanding the teaching.
Right, because you just found this father figure that
Yes,
said nice
I
things
wanted
about
to
you.
be the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And so I honestly was at a place that I was willing to be like, oh yeah, Tom is very passionate and I understand, and yeah, if someone,
Right. And I've seen this side.
if someone, and I put myself in that,
Yeah.
those shoes, and I'm like, yeah, if someone came at me yelling, yeah, of course I would be like, oh yeah, and I'd give it right back to him. And so, yes, of course. And so I developed this, like, almost like he was fulfilling things that a dad should fulfill for me. And so I became very fearful that I was going to do something that would disappoint him, or I would do something that would let him down or make him upset.
Right.
And so those were like my like, I didn't want to cause anyone to stumble. I've gone through all these classes. I've learned all of this stuff about how, like, I, you know,
Well, let's talk about that really quick, because you just said something that, like, you went from non-churched to now you have this lingo of, like, I don't want to make it, like,
oh yeah, like I've gone through all these classes and I've learned when you sin, it can cause other people to sin,
Yeah.
or even the appearance of sin can cause someone to sin.
Did you know any of, because I know there's more than just causing somebody to stumble, but you said that, and to me that's like a catchphrase
Yeah.
that we only use in the Christian church.
Yeah.
So you didn't have any of this language before
No.
being taught through
No,
all of these classes
all of
and
these
all
things. I'm lucky to be chosen. Can you believe I get to serve God in this way? I didn't want to cause others to stumble. I was terrified that there was something I was going to do as a mom that was going to let evil into my kids' life. Like, I was constantly, like, trying to be such a great mom, because again, I'm taking these classes. I'm trying to be a wife that, like, I am the perfect helper. And my personality, me, who I am at my core, I'm not that meek, gentle person.
Yeah.
I've become the youth leader at this point. I'm the
You're
leader.
all in. You are like,
Yeah,
all in.
I'm the leader. I'm the media director.
Yeah.
I've talked Tom into letting me start a Facebook page.
Yeah.
And I get pregnant with our second, with Clayton. And I'm super sick. Like, super sick.
Yeah.
I lost weight when I was pregnant with him. Like, I had morning sickness from the day I conceived that kid till the day I had him.
Right.
I threw up all day, every day.
Yeah.
And I was so all in, and I was so willing to do whatever it took to make it work and to be who I needed to be for the church. I wasn't working. I was babysitting people from the church. I was babysitting their kids off and on out of my house just to kind of have a little bit of extra income. I'm in the office volunteering, doing, website stuff, social media stuff, all of that, for hours a week. And every January we have a big membership banquet. Everyone, renews like, yes, I'm a member of this church. This is my family. I'm all in. It was a big deal because we had brought on another pastor that year. So, this pastor, we're calling him Pastor All Reliable because he's there.
He's strong and steady, sturdy. Yep.
Yes, and so he becomes a pastor. We affirm him as a pastor. We all vote for him to be like. It was like, hey, we're gonna have All Reliable. We're gonna make him a pastor, and so everyone needs to vote for this. And so after church, you're gonna stay for a few minutes after church. If you don't want to be a part of this, you don't have to. You're free to go. Everyone stayed. Everyone sat there in the auditorium at the high school. They brought him and his wife up on stage. Tom and Charlotte are up on stage. And Tom says, does anyone have any reason why All Reliable should not be a pastor? Has he done anything in his life? Has he had anything that shows you he has behavior unbecoming of a pastor? No one said anything. So he said, raise your hand if you believe All Reliable should be a pastor. Unanimously, every single hand goes up. We make him a pastor. So this is the first banquet we have where All Reliable's a pastor. It's exciting. We typically would do like a potluck thing at we'd rent a room at the town hall and we'd do it. This was bougie. We rented a place in like a bigger town just down the road. Like we had catering.
Wow.
Like it was a very fancy.
Yeah. Right?
And so it's January, Clay was born in August. So I'm pregnant enough that it's clear I'm pregnant, but I'm not like huge, miserable pregnant, but I am so sick. And it was me and this guy who are the youth leaders. He was supposed to be there. Something happened and he didn't show up. I am in the bathroom throwing up, feeling guilty because I am throwing up the catered meal that the church has paid for. Yeah. And I am a horrible person because I just ate all this food that the church paid for and now I'm puking it up in the bathroom. And this is awful. I just shouldn't have ate anything. Like, why did I eat? I'm wasting this. Like, I'm feeling awful for doing that. And I'm throwing up and my husband opens the door to the women's bathroom and there's other women in there and he startles them. And he's like, Amanda? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, the guy didn't show, like, they need someone to get up on the stage and talk about youth and you're the only one here. Like, they're talking about children's ministry right now. Like, you need to get up and talk about the youth group. Like, you're next. And I'm like, okay. So, like, I pull myself together. I force myself to stop throwing up. I, like, kind of splash some water on my face. There's a woman in the bathroom with me, and she kind of, like, I'm like, do I have puke on me? Like, does my hair look okay? She kind of, like, helps me get myself situated. I walk from the back of the room up to the front to the stage. I say, like, 2 sentences about youth group. I don't even know what I said. I say, like, 2 sentences about youth group, and I run back to the bathroom and continue to throw up.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
And I'm so invested at this point. I'm so all in that I'm willing to do that. I'm physically not well and I feel guilty for it.
Right. It's crazy. Indoctrination is crazy. Love bombing is crazy. it created a dependency.
Well, and there's this
And even
there's
if
this thing
it's
called
an emotional
euphoria induction,
dependency.
and it's
Yeah.
basically like anything you do
Yeah.
reaches a level of fulfillment that like
Yeah.
you walk away from it and you're like, so like we would call it a Jesus high.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, these are the times where I'm starting to go to women's retreats, and
Yeah.
like we would go away up to the mountains and stay at this big old cabin and all of these things, and women would speak and share their testimonies and everyone would cry, and you'd come down the mountain and you just had this like euphoric like, and they would say like, when you leave the mountain, don't lose your Jesus high. You're going to get back down in the
Yeah.
real world and it's going to smack you in the face, and remember how close you felt to God up here on the mountaintop.
Yeah.
And I lived for the mountaintop to mountaintop to mountaintop
you're
experience.
you're constantly trying to get to these implied or directive levels. I mean, that's the step classes. That's you have to take this. You have to be able to do these things before you can. And in no way, shape, or form am I saying that it's wrong that we have to be like trained in some way to do things. Like you should be trained to be a youth leader. Like that situation was not okay.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's a good thing you're a nice, normal human being. But but at the end of the day, like these perceived levels, or there's this inner group, and you know, these are all tactics and things that go on in cults. And one of the big things that we've come to the realization, I've come to the realization of, is like, there's a lot of things that we do that in and of themselves are not wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out where the level of, is it a certain number of things that you do? Is it the amount of time that you do them? Is it to the level that you do them? What takes these things that seem so innocent, that these people who genuinely just want to love on you, care for you, and bring you into the family of God, where does it turn, you know, south?
Yeah.
And when does it become a problem? And when do we see enough flags to say, okay, this environment is toxic? And then how come we as Christians are breeding toxic environments? Like, these are my questions that I have going into all this. But it is interesting to me hearing your story, that I can see, like, a couple years ago, I would have listened to this story because it would have fallen into the narrative of, how did you come as you are? Tell us your come as you are story. Like, what's your come as you are testimony?
Oh my gosh.
Like, and I would have looked at it, and it would have been a badge of honor for you, and I would have been like, man, I want to be, I want to come as you are story, just like Amanda.
Over on our page, I'm going to find it. I've just decided. On our Patreon, for the 20th anniversary of Come As You Are.
Oh, yeah.
I stood on the stage.
Yeah, and you told
and I told
my
badge
story. Of honor testimony, Come As You Are.
And I cried and I begged people.
Yeah, and I would have ate it up. I did eat it up. I was there.
If you are not all in, you're missing out.
Yeah.
You are missing out on something so amazing. And I stood on that stage with that microphone and I cried and I begged people to be all in.
Yeah.
Because I believed it so wholeheartedly. And the stories that I told, I can't even.
No, and it's such an indirect. It's something we have to go into. It's not like, but it's like, you know what you have to do. You know what you have to say because you've been conditioned in some way, shape, or form. And sitting here listening to your story now, with all of the diving down so many rabbit trails on high control organizations and toxic and narcissism and abuse and Christianity in America and Christianity for women in America, like, the eyes wide open perspective, it's like textbook indoctrination, conditioned, loved bomb, so that you could be made and then reproduced and then reproduced.
And everyone knew that was the goal.
Yeah.
You take these classes, you do these studies, you sit in the sermons, you serve on the teams, And that's what you do. And that's what's called being a disciple.
Yeah.
And then you go and you get others to do it. That's called being a disciple maker, because God said, go and make disciples of all nations and teach them to obey. Part of obeying is you need to know how to read the word of God. You need to know how to pray. You need to listen to your authorities. You need to be a good mom. You need to be a good wife. You need to.
And here's the book I want you to study on that.
Yeah.
And only this book, and then, and if you want to be a mother, these books are approved for you to study how to be a mother. And if you want to be a good wife, these are the approved list of books that you can read outside of the Bible. The Bible's always
Which is so
approved.
wild to me, because there were classes that we took that taught us how to be good wives. Which, I mean, we're going to get into that in our marriage episode. So there's classes that we took that taught us.
Like, you were taught everything. You're just taught.
There was never a Bible study. There was never a class on how to be a mom.
Right.
And I mean, we're going to get there. Like, once we get to the point where Brandy enters the timeline, we're going to talk about mom's group.
Right.
Because that was the missing piece for so many of us, is we didn't have that. We were told how to be a good Christian, how to be a good disciple, how to be a good wife, all of these things. There was no how-to manual to be a good mom.
Right.
And so we're all out here flailing, trying to figure it out on our own. And that's why being invited to Morning Munchies was so important to me, because I wanted so badly to be a good mom. I was terrified that I was going to do something that was going to ruin my kids' life.
Yeah.
And that I would invite evil into my home, and they wouldn't know.
Well, you can't pray a hedge of protection, so you're
No, exactly.
Red flag, love bombing leads to Kool-Aid drinking. Burning Butterflies is a listener-supported podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing supporters on Patreon.
Follow the link in our show notes to learn how you can become a Patreon supporter too. Supporters get exclusive access to bonus content each month, including outtakes, cut content, and supporter-only episodes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating on your listening platform.
Burning Butterflies is a production of Asha Media. Thank you for listening.